Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Fueling Efficiency, Tackling Healthcare Food Service Challenges Through Staff Training and Menu Optimization. My name is Jenny Kinter. I am an Associate Marketing Manager at General Mills and will be your host for the webinar today. This webinar is sponsored by General Mills Foodservice, providing the food people love away from home. We are proud to offer the quality products food service professionals rely on for consistent results in their own operations, as well as the beloved brands their customers know and trust. Today's webinar is supported by General Mills Bell Institute of Health and Nutrition. The Bell Institute is the company's internal source for scientific health and nutrition expertise. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping reminders. Today's webinar will be recorded with a Q&A session at the end. However, you may submit questions at any time during the webinar by clicking the Q&A icon on the top of your screen. After the webinar concludes, you will receive an email with links to the slides as well as continuing education credit certificates in the coming days. Make sure you check your spam box. Sometimes they'd like to find their way there. Please note, approval by the Commission on Dietetic Registration for CEUs was not requested for this webinar. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce today's experts. Elaine Farley-Zoucha, RDN, LMNT, was the founder and owner of Easy Nutrition Consulting, PC, which recently partnered with Dining RD. She has over 20 years of experience in food service management, culinary arts, and medical nutrition therapy. She began her career as a dietetic technician, registered, and chef with an associate degree from Southeast Community College, Lincoln, in food service management, culinary arts, and dietetic technology. She completed her Bachelor of Science in Nutrition Science and Dietetics at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and her internship at the University of Iowa Hospital and Clinics. Since joining the Chefs of the Mills in 2006, Chef Sonja Kehr built more than 25 years of previous food service experience, working in restaurants, bakeries, colleges and universities, hospitals and healthcare, and catering organizations. Additionally, she has earned certs including Executive Chef, Sous Chef, Dietary Manager, and Food Protection Professional. A dedicated learner, Chef Sonja has an associate degree in culinary arts from the University of Toledo and a bachelor's degree in culinary management from the Art Institutes International of Minnesota. She has also completed the Cook's Apprenticeship with the American Culinary Federation. With that, let's go ahead and begin our presentation. I hope you all enjoy, and I will send it to Elaine. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you again for having us this afternoon. So today we are going to be talking about tackling healthcare food service challenges through staff training and menu optimization. The objectives for today are listed here. We are going to list key challenges facing healthcare food service operations, describe ways that staff training can increase efficiencies and create productive workflows. We also want to identify ways to optimize menus to improve labor efficiencies, reduce food waste, while still meeting the preferences of patients and residents. And as always, we know that the menu drives everything that happens in our food service operation. So we need to apply menu optimization techniques, which Chef Sonja will go into some more detail on. And what type of solutions can we employ in our food service operation? So when doing some research on budget and cost control and what are those healthcare challenges that we have been facing, these have been ongoing challenges for the last 4 to 5 years. Staffing is key. We know that we're definitely seeing an improvement in staffing, but it is still one of the top facing challenges there, not only in the food service industry, but specifically in the healthcare realm. So when we're talking staffing, we also need to look at staff training, development, engagement. 69% of the surveyors said that this is a key thing that they struggle with and are concerned with. And then there's always concern about budget and financial concerns. So we are going to talk a little bit about how do we manage that budget and those financial concerns by optimizing our menu solutions. As we said, concerns and challenges are definitely there when it comes to labor, relating specifically to staffing on its own. How are we encouraging, applications? How are we getting them in the door? What are our hiring practices? How are we retaining them once they are in the door? We're still seeing some supply chain issues as well, not near what we had the last few years, but that's definitely still a concern. And we know that inflation and rising costs have definitely been on the forefront for the last couple of years. And along with all of that, we need to look at our operational efficiencies to complement those labor shortages that we are still seeing. Cost increasers, there's 4 key cost increasers, and we're going to focus on staffing as one of those and then menu optimization. But we also need to look at some of the things such as insufficient management and training and lacks of check and balances within our operation. So, staff turnover. This seems to be a headache for quite a few facilities that we service. And I always lead with, when we have staff turnover, it's extremely costly to our community. So we need to put the money and the effort up front in making sure that we are bringing in the right candidates, we're hiring correctly, and we're retaining them. And to prevent that staff turnover, because the average cost of one employee within a food service operation can range anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. If you're turning over anywhere from 3 to 10 staff a year, that can add up very, very quickly. And we often don't think of that cost associated with bringing somebody on and them only being there 2-3 weeks, 3 months, and what that looks like. And it is extremely costly. So we want to keep that turnover down. We know that there's, costs associated with that, and some of those costs are loss of wages and managerial time, productivity loss, operational time due to the time that it takes to train. And what is it doing to your overall morale with your operation? When we're constantly turning over, how does that affect the morale and the outlook of the operation? We also know that it's going to affect quality, and so we want to prevent all of those issues that go with staff turnover. With staffing, it has to start with hiring. And hiring cannot start with just the interview process. You have to prepare properly in order to hire properly. So when you're preparing for that position, what type of position do you need to fill? What are the skill sets that are needed to perform that job? Tailor the ad to target that audience. We see a lot of times job postings out there for food service operation that just says full-time cook needed. Well, what does that entail? What are the hours? What's a little bit more detail? What's the skill set needed? Target those ads so that you get the right applicants to start with. Because we know and we hear a lot of times that the amount of applicants coming in is small, but then you can't get them to actually show up to the interview. And so if you're actually having a good targeted ad, then you're more likely to be attracting the right candidates. You need to prepare for that interview as well, and make sure that you're involving your other staff in the preparation and the interview process. So I employ to you that you look at competency-based hiring, not just hiring just a body or just a cook or just an aide, but really focus on what are the competencies needed in order to fill that position and to be able to properly do the job that is being asked of them. So if we're doing competency-based hiring, it prevents employers from hiring wrong candidates that aren't qualified. And we need to base those competencies off of our job description or job duties. And then the job description needs to mirror the competencies as well. So those two pieces go hand in hand. And we know that if we are utilizing competency-based hiring, it's going to decrease our overall staff turnover. So how do we identify those competencies that we're looking for? The first thing that you need to do is you need to look at the day-to-day job duties for the position that you're hiring. What are the skills needed? So not just what type of manual skills are needed. Do they need to have good knife skills? Do they need to have good sanitation? But what are the type of when we're looking at skills, what type of thinking processes do they have? Do you need a critical thinker? Do they need to be able to pivot and be able to critically think if a product hasn't showed up? What is the emotional and overall skill set? So not just those hard skills, but also the other skills that are needed. So you want to create and utilize the detailed job description and identify those competencies. Those behavioral traits that I was talking about, what type of behavioral traits does an individual need to be successful at that position? And then identify an employee in that position that exemplifies that ideal worker. What does their behavioral traits look like? What are they possessing to be successful? And then look at that aspect as well. Do you need another person like that? Do they need to have the same skill sets, the same behavior traits? What are you exactly looking for? Make sure that you're involving the employees as well when you're identifying those competencies. As a manager, sometimes you might not be always in the day-to-day. So really ask the employees, what do you feel you need to be successful in this position? And have them help to discern those competencies and those skills that are needed when you're looking at your job description and your overall competencies. When we're looking at interviewing, it starts with the interview type. And if you're going to get the right candidate and be able to discern if they have the right skill set and the right behavior trait, you have to look at your interview style. We used to do, years ago, 10, 15 years ago, we transitioned from that traditional interviewing style to a behavioral type interviewing. Traditional interviewing was that, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your goals for the next 3 years? Well, what exactly is that going to tell you if you're looking for a morning cook that has to have certain skill sets? It's not going to tell you a whole lot. So you really need to look at behavioral-based interviewing, identifying those skills that are needed. Questions need to be focused on and based on those competencies that you have established. And those questions need to be presented in a way that the individual that is answering the question can respond back with examples. So a good behavioral-based interview question would be, tell me how you would resolve the issue of being short a product that you needed for the lunch service and it's 8 o'clock in the morning. What would you do? What steps would you take in order to be able to resolve that issue and still put a meal out on time and that meets the recommendations and the regulations that are needed? So that is a behavioral-based interview question that's going to bring out what type of skills that they have. It's also going to bring out those behavior traits that you may be looking for as well. So those questions need to be focused to where they can be answered with examples and specify situations. So once we've completed the interview process, we need to close the interview properly. We need to allow the candidate time to ask questions. You should have provided a job description at the beginning of the interview. Allow them time to review that job description. Maybe it's a list of competencies that they also need to have that you provide them, but provide them with items that they can actually review and ask questions on. Give them time to ask those questions. Guide the applicant through that next phase. What does it look like? Are there going to be any type of competency exams that are needed? Are they going to need to do X, Y, and Z before the next step? What does that look like for them? Make sure that they've got clear details about the position. What are the work hours? Make sure that they know if there's holidays or weekend hours. And then make sure that they do fully understand the difference between working in, say, fast food and the healthcare sector. So when I do interviews in the healthcare sector and I'm looking for cooks, I will bring to the interview the job description. I'll also bring to the interview therapeutic spreadsheets so that they can see how our menus are broke down. I will ask them to read a recipe and go through it, talk to them about certain key things that they need so that they've got a clear picture of what this position's going to be, because then that allows them to ask the questions that they need to ask. Let them know when they can expect to hear from you. And please, please, please do not hire on the spot. You look desperate when you do that, not to mention sometimes you can hire incorrectly. You need the time to go back, read back through the answers that they gave you, reflect on the interview process, give yourself some time to be able to let it all sink in and make sure that that candidate is the right candidate. So once we have the person in-house and they've gone through the interview process, they've accepted the job, you want to again provide them with the job description. Not just job description, but specific job duty lists as well. Make sure you have a orientation checklist. I see so many communities not have this piece, and this is where training can go wrong. And you need to have a checklist of what you need to train. And that checklist needs to be based off of the competencies that you've established. Make sure you've established a proper training schedule for each position. Different positions are going to require different lengths of time for training. Also, the person's experience is going to establish a training schedule as well. You may hire somebody that has a lot of experience, that's worked in healthcare for a long time, and you may have somebody that's never worked in healthcare. And so you need to really look at that training schedule and focus that training schedule around the hire that you have made. Ensure that you have enough training time, and then make sure throughout the training process that you are giving feedback and allowing the trainee to give feedback as well. If you've established any competency tests that are needed, then make sure that those are known ahead of time and they are spaced throughout the training, and that you've established what the level of pass rate needs to be for those competency tests for that person to move on to the next task of learning. Now, how do we retain that new hire? When we're looking at retaining, we know that the research shows that there are certain factors that affect employee retention. The ones that I have starred here tend to be the highest ones that we're seeing in the most recent survey results. So supportive leadership is number one. Individuals are looking for supportive management, that they are good communicators, that they guide well, that they give good feedback, open to communication, open to suggestions. So that falls into that relationship with that immediate supervisor and staff. COVID has definitely changed some things where people are starting to look back and, really thrive on that that relationship aspect with their peers that they work with, being part of a team as well. And then know how each of your employees like to be recognized. Do they like public recognition, or would they rather have just a private word of you're doing a great job? Know what motivates each of your individual employees. And then compensation as well, making sure that they are being compensated for the job that they're doing. Excuse me. So some of those retention strategies, excuse me, sorry about that. So some of those retention strategies are going to be based off of the training programs. We want to make sure that we have established a good training program. Mentoring or having somebody that guides that individual and can build that relationship can also enhance those skills that need to be developed as well. Encourage those new ideas and that open communication. As a manager, you don't know everything. We are not perfect as managers, and we want the feedback of our other staff. And we want to know, how is things working for them? Is this process working, or is it not an ideal process? What do we need to change? Get that feedback and be open to constructive criticism from your own staff. Offer training programs that promote that personal and professional growth as well. If there's an opportunity for an individual to take on more in that role or in your department, do they have the skill set? Identify, who are those that really want to go above and beyond, and then mentor them. Give them some side tasks like helping with inventory or helping with the schedule. That allows them the growth that they may be looking for. It also helps with stability within the department when the manager can't be there. It gives you a backup as well. It also helps your staff to understand all of the ins and outs of the food service operation. Support that work-life balance as well. That is a key thing that people are looking for nowadays, is work-life balance. And so ensuring that we are providing that work-life balance. And I know during staff shortages, that tends to be a difficult thing in certain communities. But really try to focus and work with your staff on what matters to them and how can you accomplish that. We know that we have certain things that we have to meet for operation standards, but we also want to be very mindful of that work-life balance for our staff. Really giving employee feedback surveys and taking those surveys to heart. And so when you're doing a new trainee, make sure that throughout that training process that you're doing some sort of survey or feedback process as well, because not only with the trainee, but with the people that you're having train them, make sure that they're doing feedback on each other so that you can better your training and orientation process, which in return is going to retain that staff member. So to keep employees once they are hired, employers must provide adequate training to inspire that confidence on the job and adequate staff to prevent overload and burnout. And this has been a challenge, but hopefully with some of the tips that you learned today, and you can balance all of this as well. So the next segment that we want to talk about goes right into what are we going to train on? And we know that if we are going to have a good food service operation, that it's not just about having the good staff, but we have to train them on how to manage the menu, manage inventory, and production optimizations. As I said before, the menu drives everything within your food service department. And we know that a sizable portion of that operation cost is tied up in the products that we purchase. So we need to manage our inventory properly to maximize every dollar spent. And we need to reduce waste and overstocking. We also need to have a good checks and balance in place so that that will eliminate the opportunity for theft or poor product management. So let's talk about how do we look at our department. And if you're in healthcare, especially in the post-acute long-term care, you know that you have a facility assessment that has to be done every year. But no matter what realm you're in, acute care or restaurant industry, it doesn't matter. You should have some sort of operation assessment happening within your food service department, because these assessment tools can assist in running your day-to-day operations. They can they help you to comply with regulations, whether that's the food code regulations or CMS regulations, JCO regulations, whatever regulations that you have to meet. The assessment should focus on, are we meeting and complying with those regulations? It also helps to assist in meeting the preferences of the population that you're serving, and it assists in meeting staffing and budget demands. And then we want to ensure that staff are properly trained. And by assessing your food service department, knowing what your food service department needs, that will ensure that you have a proper training program laid out. So when we have a menu, we need to know that our goals, our facility goals, have to align with the menu and vice versa. The menu has to align with the goals that we're looking at. But when we're looking at what are your facility goals, maybe your goal is, one of your goals is to have, the freshest menu in your 30-mile radius at your community. Whatever those goals are, you need to analyze the menu, and is the menu right for your facility? What type of menu philosophy are you looking at? Is it a 6-week cycle menu? Are you doing restaurant style dining? Are you having, 2 or 3 entrees a day and a soup and a sandwich special? What type of menu service and menu philosophy do you have? Are those ideas and goals in your menu meeting the regulations? What's your budget? Do you have the budget to do some of these elaborate things? Or do you need to scale back and look at that? So labor, do you have a labor shortage in your area? What does that look like? How much labor is it going to take to have an all scratch menu versus a semi-scratch menu? What type of equipment do you have available for you? What's your kitchen layout look like? Is it going to meet the demands of the menu that you're wanting to do? And then what's the preferences of the majority of the population that you're serving? And you have to meet those preferences to the best of your ability. And then what type of products are available to you? So the whole process starts with aligning those goals. And then we need to look at product optimization, operational excellence, and then we have to monitor. We have to have benchmarks. What are we looking at? What do we consider successful? And how are we measuring those outcomes? When we have misalignment of our menu, then it results in frustrated labor needs and training. It also decreases resident patient satisfaction, can increase waste. It could also affect meeting regulations, and then it could have a disastrous effect on your budget as well. So let's look specifically at staffing needs. And the next couple slides are going to give you some calculations on staffing needs. And no worries, we're going to go through this pretty quick, but just know that these slides will be provided. So if you want these calculations, they will be provided to you after we complete this webinar here. So, but when we're looking at staffing needs, we need to estimate what's the labor cost that we're going to be looking at. Your labor is going to be focused on the type of menu that you have. What type of menu do you have? How much labor, how many labor hours are you going to need? What's that staffing requirement? Do we have productivity standards in place? How does that equivalate into FTEs for the department? Some other considerations that you need to look at is your kitchen layout and then the quality of menu items that you're providing as well. So here are those calculations that I spoke of. Again, we're not going to go through them in detail right now, but please note that you need to have accurate calculations when it comes to staffing needs in order to be able to go to the administration and fight for what you need. You need to be able to have the data because everything is data driven and we need to be able to show our effectiveness. So here's the calculations for calculating full-time equivalents that are needed. And then some other monthly calculations that you may need are total labor hours for the month. You may also want to look at meals, per patient day. There's all sorts of different things that you could utilize in order to manage that. So minutes per meal, how many minutes is it taking to prepare a meal? And are you sticking with your labor hours, or are you finding that your menu is outside of what labor hours you have? And do those need to be adjusted? So really look at those calculations and track some of this data, because if you don't have the data, you don't know where you need to make changes to be more effective. So operational excellence is the next piece of the puzzle. And Chef Sonja is going to talk some more about this here shortly as well. But when we're looking at operational excellence, there's a couple different things that we need to take into focus and, into consideration. And some of those areas are obviously the overall menu and what type of menu tool do you have? Are you utilizing technology tools in order to have timely, up-to-date forecasting and production guidance, up-to-date ordering guides? Do you have the technology that integrates with your electronic medical record? Does it integrate with your inventory system? What does those integrations look like? Does your menu system integrate and pull in your vendor information on a daily basis so that you have up-to-date current pricing? So really focusing on those technology tools that are available to help with those efficiencies and those operational excellencies. Inventory is key. I cannot say enough about inventory. If you're not taking inventory prior to every order that you put in, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because if you don't know what you have in stock, then you're not going to be able to properly order as well. And so you have to utilize that menu tool. And when we say menu tool, don't just look at the meal, the week at a glance or the main meal. If you have therapeutic diets that you're providing or special things that you're providing, you have to really look at the full picture. Again, that's where those technology tools come in, because if you've got 5 or 6 different diets that you're providing, then you can scale your shopping list to the days that you need to look at, as well as the therapeutic spreadsheets that are needed. So for instance, you might have ham on the menu for the main entree, but you provide a therapeutic diet of a modified renal. Well, that modified renal is not going to be allowed the ham. They're going to likely have pork roast. But if you're not utilizing a order guide, or you're not utilizing the therapeutic order guides, then you're going to miss that. And so you're going to have improper inventory. So make sure that you're using proper tools to manage that inventory Make sure you're using proper order guides, establish par levels for things like, snack carts and nourishment refrigerators, etc. Make sure you've got good inventory practices such as first in, first out. And then really focus on the forecasting. So our census can vary in certain communities, especially acute care. You may have a full house on Monday, and by Wednesday, you've lost 50% of your people that you're serving. So really forecasting and utilizing those tools to forecast what those day-to-day needs are. Again, streamline those order guides. Look at the order, look at the menu. Do you have duplicates on there? Are you combining items? Do we need to move some things around in order to cross-utilize some of the items better? So, make sure that when you're looking at that shopping list and that order guide, that you're really focusing on like items or duplicates, and how can we change some of those things? Do we need to make some alterations to that? And you just as you want to slim down the variety of products you purchase, you should also look at how many vendors are you using as well. We know that we need to have a couple vendors to be able to, price shop, and maybe this vendor has a certain product, but that vendor doesn't. But you don't need to have 5 or 6 vendors, because again, that is not a good, efficient practice. You spend too much time looking at different vendors and then not enough time on being able to focus on that cost saving efficiencies. Along with streamlining your order guide, consider timing of those menu offerings. So, look ahead, not just at the week that you're ordering for, but look over the entire menu prior to putting it in place. Make sure that you're moving things around if need be. So an example here is if you have a 6-week cycle menu and week 1 has beef pot roast, and then week 4 has scratch beef vegetable soup, then maybe you need to move that soup a few days after the pot roast so that you can maximize those leftovers. And Chef's going to talk about utilizing leftovers in her segment as well. So really pay attention to some of those operational excellent things that you can do. Consider product qualities as well, making sure that you're looking at nutrition profiles, hold time of products, the timing of production, what type of pack sizes. If you're a small community and you can only get a large pack size, is that the best option to purchase from a larger vendor, or do we need to be looking at some local purchases to maximize costs and pack size as well as storage? So if you are in healthcare, you likely have some sort of purchasing contract. It is key to understand your purchasing contracts that you have. I am amazed at how many of the managers that we work with, that they will go through a menu with us, and then we'll ask about their purchasing contract and what's on those purchasing contracts, and they don't even know if they have a purchasing contract. And these contracts can be, big savings, but they can also be pitfalls for smaller communities. So you really need to understand the incentives and the rebates on there. Do you have to have a specific number of deliveries or a specific minimum order size? What's that drop size? What are the payment terms of it? Because if you're small enough, utilizing the purchasing contract may not be the best route to go. So you really have to understand that purchasing contract and know what you can and can't do and what the best route is for your community. Other things that you need to look at when controlling costs, I already talked a little bit about production sheets, but adjusting those production numbers on a day-to-day basis, because overproduction can be a key factor in high food costs. And so if you're overproducing and not utilizing that overproduction, then we have big problems. Then you have big food waste costs. And there's nothing worse than throwing money literally in the garbage. And that is what you're doing with overproduction. And you aren't going to know if you have overproduction if you don't have checks and balances in place and you're not using proper monitoring tools. So make sure that you have accurate production sheets, you're monitoring the waste and the leftovers, and you're documenting that so that maybe it's one cook that is overproducing on a regular basis and what's going on. But if you're not monitoring, then you don't know, and you don't know where the problem is. Delegate responsibilities. As I was saying, empowering some of those that show incentives or show initiatives and want a little more responsibility. Delegating inventory or helping to put away the grocery order, training up those employees to take on more responsibility will empower them. It shows them that you trust them and that you matter and you value them, as well as giving them an extra skill set and having a backup when the manager cannot be in there. But you need to have set inventory parameters. What does that look like? How often are you doing it? Making sure that inventory is put away in the same spot every time so that you can quickly go through and do your inventory before you need to order. I already mentioned making sure that you're arranging your inventory in your coolers or in your dry storage in the same spot. This helps with arranging your inventory sheet so that you can match that product location to be able to go and quickly do an inventory. You should be able to run through your inventory in 30 to 45 minutes prior to doing an order. This will ensure that you're getting accurate counts. And then make sure that you also have par levels set for those minimum quantity items. So things like juices or your snacks or your supplements, those types of par levels. How many do you need in stock before you order again? And then look at your cycle menus. Make sure that you're using the right things for your inventory, the right reports that you're printing. And when you're changing menu cycles, make sure to use your inventory records. This will help reduce waste and spoilage as well as overstocking. So all of this really has to be balanced with having the tools in place to monitor. So when we're talking checks and balances for operational excellence, you need to be doing regular inventory. You need to be monitoring daily, weekly production and waste, tracking acceptability of products that you're putting out there, and then quarterly or at least biannual customer satisfactions, and then make sure that the manager or assistant is present during meal times. So now I want to take an opportunity to transition to a culinary video from Chef Sonja. She is going to share some ideas for using one product in multiple ways in your menu. And this is a great approach that you can take to both help train your staff on how to be critical thinking, how to really utilize those leftovers, and then how to create the efficiencies within your menu as well.
So hi, everybody. That was a really great session. One of the key things that I got as a takeaway is that we really need to focus on training. So as our staff comes in, a better way for retention is to help encourage them and make them also feel successful. Well, but sometimes when you get new hires, they come in, but they really don't have any experience. So we need to think about, how are we going to train them? We need to think about food safety, equipment training and so forth. So sometimes if we wanted to do baking as a training module, that's way too broad. So I like to start and think of like one product as what can this one thing do? And let's train you as like a successful module on just that. So today we're actually going to start with cake mix. So a really easy way to go is we're actually going to make a basic streusel. So we're taking a quarter box of mix, and 1 stick of butter. And we're just going to mix it by hand. So obviously, if you're machine mixing because you're doing the whole box, that's a separate skill. So here, just because we have it and the butter is already at room temperature, that fast, we already have our streusel. Okay, so just with that, you can see we're looking at kind of like pea size. But this is a great way, because if we stop here, okay, we're actually going to go ahead and we can use this basic streusel to go ahead and top our muffins. So for there, we're going to use it as a topping for muffins. So as a basic skill, we're showing them how to scoop muffins, and we're showing them how to make the streusel to top it off, so they can see the finished product right away. The next thing that you can do with this same core streusel mix, now we can press this into the bottom of a sheet pan and use this as a crust to make bars. So from there, you can see we actually have a couple versions for you. The first one, we did the crust, then we put some cheesecake filling, and then we put the streusel on top. There, we just garnished it with berries, so you can see we easily have a cheesecake bar. As we look over here, we actually used some jar raspberry filling, and there we made a princess bar. So again, base crust, jam, and then the topping. Okay, the one next to it, we pulled 1 cup of Tide for the streusel, and then we stirred in 1 cup of pumpkin in the base, and now we made a pumpkin bar. The third one, we actually added 1 egg to the streusel mix, and now it made more of a cookie dough texture. Okay, and so that way we were able to press it in a pan. We took canned pie filling, put that on there, and then the remaining, because it's got more moisture to it, we just dropped it on there, and so they melt like little clouds on the top of the bar. So that's really cool, because you can see how easy and how fast we just made that selection. Now, let's go ahead, and since we have that core mix, 1 pound of butter to a 5 pound of mix, we're going to put that in the mixer. So now we're making a bigger batch, but we're going to go ahead and put it in there. That same mixture makes a basic shortbread. So we're going to go and look at this table, and I want to go ahead and show you that in the base mix, you can actually add either extract or food coloring. So as you saw, we had just the almond extract, we had pumpkin added, we had food coloring added, and then here we actually just layered them between plastic, so we didn't have to roll them with flour. But in this set, I want to show you that we actually just rolled that cookie dough into a hotel or into a sheet pan. The reason why I did that is because in this set, we actually added some chopped up pistachios and apricots in here. And so it makes a really flavorful bar cookie, but sometimes that makes it harder to scoop. Okay, and so we're trying to think about safety here as part of our training. And so as you're rolling it in there, then it's easy. This is like an icebox cookie. Roll it, set it in there, easily cut it, and so this way you can get like a prescribed number of servings as well, and you don't have to worry about rolling, shaping, all of that. Works really great. I'm going to sneak in one more bonus one too. So we threw in a brownie cookie for you. Basically that is add water only. Okay, and so we just did the quarter box of mix with 4 ounces of water, scooped them, and then baked them off, rolled them in powdered sugar and baked them off. And so it's just one more way that you can get a product in with only a few ingredients. And that way, minimal time, minimal labor, and we already have our buffet done. Let's go ahead and we're going to move to the other side. So one of the other skills that we need to cover is date and label everything. Now, I understand that's not necessarily a baking skill, but it's a really important skill as far as managing your inventory. So when we're thinking about that, if you're a new hire, if one of the key takeaways they get from week 1, wash your hands all the time and label and date everything. So as we get in there, now what do you do with your stuff? So this is where, you know, they might get coaching and training with maybe your lead cook or someone else on your team. And maybe it's, you know, Saturday mornings. We go in, we evaluate everything in the refrigerator, and then figure out where is it going to go into maybe Sunday brunch. So thinking about that, here are going to be some wonderful options for you. So we're calling these bread puddings and stratas. And here we use biscuits, but you can use cinnamon rolls, croissants, all sorts of things. So here we have a pumpkin bread pudding. We did it in a long hotel pan, so that way you could serve it as a bread, you could slice it off, you can, you know, basically you can bake it in any pan. The next set we did is a chocolate bread pudding. The reason why I point this one out, okay, pumpkin pie filling, chocolate milk. Okay, so basically you're just learning the ratio of making these is 1 cup of bread product, 1/2 cup of dairy product or milk type product, and 1 egg. So this gives you control to make whatever batch size you need. So you don't have to create more servings if you're trying to use up inventory. So it's kind of giving you that permission to make the right size that fits. As we move down, you can see we actually did a dump cake. We call that easy deep dish cobbler. So this is another one that you could teach when you're teaching the streusel. This, you just dump canned fruit. You add half a box of cake mix, 1 cup of butter, 1 cup of brown sugar, and literally throw it in the oven. That's that simple. But you can also do it with fresh fruit, with bruised berries. So if you have trim or things that are starting to go sour, trim out the bad part, make sure it's clean, and then you can cut it, freeze it, and then this is a place that you can use it up. So as we're looking at all of our bits and bobbles, this is where when you go through, whether it's Saturday or whatever, thinking about maybe what you're going to run for Sunday brunch, the quiche is a perfect one. So this biscuit strata actually goes through, and we have ham and broccoli. The original recipe's got asparagus, but you use what you have, okay? So basically we just had a pound of stirrings in there. We also went ahead and we did one with cinnamon rolls in our bread pudding option. I like that because it just reminds you that you can use that same core royal batter mixture to make it using any of your leftover baked goods. So now let's move one step forward, and many of you have seen our dessert mousse before, and so here we have our yogurt dessert mousse, and with this, it's equal parts by weight of yogurt and a non-dairy topping. In this case, we also flavored it with chocolate today, so we have a chocolate mousse. We did a roasted strawberry compote, and we have some chocolate croissants in there. So this, again, makes a wonderful dessert trifle. You can call it a parfait, whatever you would like to call it, but it gives you a chance to go ahead and use up your smalls, to use up your day-old baked goods. And so it just gives you one more way that you can use your content. So remember, tell your cooks, date and label everything. Go ahead and save it. We're going to evaluate everything at the end of the week. We can go ahead and freeze stuff. And it's just one more way that we can pull everything together and use all of our inventory and help our staff feel successful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to Elaine and Chef Sonja for joining us today. Now we're going to go ahead and begin our Q&A session. You may submit questions by clicking the Q&A icon on the top of your screen. We do have a few questions here queued up, and I'll keep watching them come through. So the first question is going to be for Chef Sonja. The question, Chef Sonja, is for those who experience high turnover rates, any suggestions on how to initiate a training program when you just need to get the next meal out?
So yeah, actually, this one's really great. So Elaine had mentioned that like if you use a GPO or another company, that just checking what kind of services they offer. Then I was recently meeting with a customer who's got over 400 units, and they were talking about, every single one is unique. So you don't know what level your staff is. And so they actually classified them as like extremely basic all the way up to like executive skill level. So meaning that group could make things from scratch and so forth. So they could take advantage of different efficiencies. Now, that said, Elaine also mentioned that if you buy a lot of convenience items, that can quickly add up in your cost sector. So checking with your GPO to see if they have different level menus available. This will help to meet your regulations and the different requirements for your menu applications. But then it also focuses in, okay, maybe I'm going to run a 2-week menu cycle. During this period, I'm going to have pretty much a baseline menu service, but I'm going to cover all of my bases and make sure I meet all of my, basically menu extensions, my modified diet textures. But in that set too, then it also allows you, we used to use 1 hour at the beginning of the shift that we used for training every single day until we could onboard. So if we had, sometimes, unfortunately, you might have like an entire kitchen turnover. Maybe if you have, a different management company who, takes possession of your facility, sometimes you have really short turnarounds and you need to get people on board, but we have to make sure that food safety part of our menu is always accounted for. So there are solutions out there that will help you kind of bridge these in smaller chunks. And then you can upgrade your menu level as you upgrade your skill level. So this helps to take some of the stress off the kitchen.
And there were so many things that I loved in Elaine's presentation about, reinforcing and helping your staff feel that sense of accomplishment. Okay, because that's going to then help with the retention so that you don't have continuing and ongoing turnover.
Perfect. Thank you, Chef Sonja, for that. We
Welcome.
did also get a question from Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you for your question. She asked, are we going to get a copy of the measurements for the streusels and base mixes? And yes, actually, we are going to send out the recipe ideas as well as links that Chef went over in her presentation. So we will get all of those out to you. So thank you for the question. My next question is for Elaine. Let's see. Elaine, how can we efficiently manage a large number of diverse diet restrictions and preferences while trying to streamline our ingredients?
That's a good question, for sure. So what I would do, typically in long-term care, the focus is to liberalize as much as possible. So you don't want to have a ton of restrictions for the elderly population. So if you're working in post-acute long-term care, number one would be I would work with your dietitian to try to liberalize as much as possible. If you're working in an acute care setting where you do have to have those therapeutics out there, then what I would do is try to minimize and really optimize those the use of those products. So when I spoke about, not just looking at the week, but prior to implementing a new menu cycle, really dig into it. You have to look at it 3, 4, 5 times and really look at optimizing. And you can't just look at the week at a glance or the general regular diet. You need to look at those therapeutics. And what does that look like? So for instance, if we're talking about a liberalized renal diet, and we know that those high sodium items are not necessarily going to be part of that liberalized renal diet, then what are those alternatives? And if it's 5 or 6 different things in one week that you're having to bring in into your inventory, then how can we make those changes? What can we look at that is similar in nutritive value, that similar in cost as well, because we want to manage our costs just as much as we want to ensure nutrition. But look at those items and look to see, can I take those 5 items that I'm, especially if they're a protein item, then, can I take those 5 and get them down to 3? Or is there, 5 items that I'm going to regularly use for 3 or 4 different therapeutic diets that can be effectively managed? I have enough inventory for it, or enough storage for those items. You have to take into consideration all of that, but really look at the menu before you implement, because that's where a lot of people go wrong. They'll get their new menu cycles in, they'll be changing from fall, winter to spring, summer, and they just implement it. And they don't really look at what do they have on hand, what are they going to need for the next menu cycle, and then how many different protein items. Proteins are very expensive. And so, how many protein items am I going to need to have in inventory for 1 week versus can I break it down into maybe, 3 different. So chicken, for instance, is a good example. You may have a menu that has diced chicken, boneless, skinless chicken breast, and bone-in chicken thighs on the menu. Well, do you need all of those products, or can you just utilize boneless, skinless chicken breasts, but make them in 4 different ways and still have different products that are going to appeal to your population?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elaine. Let's do one more question and then I'll go ahead and close us out. This one is also for you, Elaine, and it's, are there any technologies that can help in training staff?
For sure. We mentioned, Chef mentioned reaching out to your vendors. And I mean, this here alone, General Mills and some of those partners and wholesalers that are out there that have great tools, utilize your dietitian that you have as well. Reach out to, I'd be happy to take questions. And, at Dining RD, we have a lot of great resources. But when we're talking about, looking at one of the tools that we're going to provide for you guys today is actually an orientation and competency checklist that I pulled together. So that will be coming in your handouts as well. So you can take that list and you can alter it and specific to your community. But like Chef's example of 400 units of, one corporation having 400 different units, each of those units are going to be really unique, and you need to focus on your own, but then take some of those tools that are being provided to you today as well. And then reach out, talk to other people too. Networking with other managers is huge. So you can see what's working for them, get ideas from them as well. But really, bringing all of those together, but tweak them for your own community.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elaine. And again, to Chef Sonja for joining us today. We are going to go ahead and start to close out the presentation. I did want to remind you that you'll be receiving an email in the coming days that will include links to the slides presented today, as well as the continuing education certificates. Remember to check your spam folder. Additionally, please make sure to visit generalmillsfoodservice.com for information on rebates, helpful marketing tools, videos, and new item launches. Finally, please don't forget to connect with us as well as the Bell Institute of Health on our websites and socials. This will conclude today's program, and you may now disconnect. Thank you so much for joining us today.